Hey everyone, and welcome to The Deep Dive, where we like to, take a deep dive into a single topic and really try to figure out what's what. And today, we are diving into the world of Adidas. You know, those three stripes. Are they really stitched onto a solid future, or are there some, loose threads that Adidas really needs to address?
To help us figure this all out, we have someone who knows a thing or two about Adidas's kind of inner workings. Joining us is the former global head of strategy and projects at Adidas, Seva Karlitsky.
Hi everyone, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you've seen Adidas's game plan from up close and personal. So let's talk about something that's been catching a lot of people's eyes. Adidas Originals.
Yeah.
I mean, those Gazelles, those Sambas, they're everywhere these days. It's like we're all back in the 90s or something.
Yeah.
What is fueling this whole retro revival?
It's pretty fascinating. Yeah, we're really right in the middle of this terrace trend, kind of a nostalgia wave that's been, building for a while. And you're right, Adidas Originals is definitely riding that wave to success, especially this past summer.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. I actually think this whole boom, it's going to fade by 2026.
Oh, wow. Seriously, that soon? Why does this trend have an expiration date?
Well, think about it. In a couple of years, pretty much everyone who wants a pair of Gazelles is going to have a pair of Gazelles,
Yeah.
right? I mean, trends are kind of cyclical, right? What's old is new again, but then it becomes old again. And Adidas hasn't really, I think, proven that they have that next, it shoe, waiting in the wings, They're great at, reinvention, bringing back those classics, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But creating the next big thing, that's where I think they maybe haven't quite hit their stride.
That's interesting because, Adidas kind of did this similar thing with the Stan Smiths a few years ago. They were everywhere.
Total.
And then poof.
Yeah.
Gone. So you're saying that Adidas just isn't focused on innovation?
Oh, no, they're definitely putting in the effort.
Okay.
But, from my experience, I think there's a bit of a hesitancy to really go outside the lines.
Yeah.
When I was at Adidas, there was a real reluctance to kind of really invest in experimental designs, especially when there was pressure to deliver those predictable quarterly results.
Yeah.
Nike, on the other hand, they seem to thrive on taking risks.
Yeah.
They're constantly releasing these bold new designs. I mean, think about it. Adidas had a hit with that NMD shoe.
Right.
But then they kind of struggled to recapture that magic.
Yeah.
Nike, on the other hand, they consistently, iterate on classics like their Air Max. They always keep things fresh and exciting.
So Adidas is great at catching the wave, but not so great at creating the wave. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. And if we look at the bigger picture here, this could make Adidas's, ambitious profit goals a little challenging.
Right. Because riding a fading trend isn't exactly a recipe for success, right? And it's not the challenge is just stop there. Didn't you also highlight some obstacles that Adidas is facing in some pretty key markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, North America, for example,
Yeah.
that remains a tough nut to crack. Nike's grip on that market, especially when you think about basketball, it's incredibly strong.
Yeah, it's Nike's home turf.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's China. China is a notoriously difficult market for Western brands right now.
Yeah.
Competition from local brands is fierce. Consumers there, they're very discerning.
Right.
It takes more than just a recognizable logo to win them over,
Yeah. So that's two major markets where Adidas is facing some pretty stiff competition. Where's the glimmer of hope? Where are they seeing potential for growth?
Well, they're putting a lot of their eggs in the Latin American basket. They've been experiencing really strong double-digit growth there, particularly in the running segment.
Wow, okay. So that's really interesting. So it sounds like they're focusing on a specific region and a specific product category. It's they're moving away from that one-size-fits-all global strategy, right?
You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adidas is definitely shifting to a more localized approach. They're tailoring their products and their marketing to specific regions, hoping to resonate more deeply with local consumers. It's a big change. It's a recognition that what works in Berlin might not work in Beijing.
Right.
Only time will tell how effective it will be.
And speaking of change, Adidas has a new CEO at the helm, Bjorn Gulden.
Yeah.
He came over from Puma, and from what you've said, he seems to be pushing for a different approach at Adidas.
Yeah, he is. And it'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. He's all about agility, about making Adidas much more responsive to trends. But Here's the thing. He's stepping into a company with a very, very different culture than Nike.
What do you mean? How are their cultures different?
Well, in my experience, Adidas tends to be like more cautious, more risk-averse. It's in their DNA, you know? Nike, on the other hand, they have that just do it mentality.
Right.
They're not afraid to fail fast and pivot.
So you're saying that even if Gulden wants to make Adidas more agile, he kind of has an uphill battle against that more like ingrained, cautious culture.
Yep.
It's like trying to like teach an old dog new tricks.
Exactly. And that cultural difference, that cautiousness, it might also be impacting how Adidas is kind of perceived in the market,
Okay.
especially when it comes to their pricing strategy.
Their pricing, what do you mean?
It's like less about if their prices are too high or too low. It's more about how those prices are kind of perceived. You know, Nike has mastered this air of like premium aspiration.
Right.
Like you pay a bit more for Nike, but you're like buying into this legacy of innovation and style, right?
It's like the difference between like a reliable car and like a luxury car.
Yeah.
They both get you where you need to go, but
Yeah.
one kind of whispers like success.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes. And Adidas, you know, is kind of stuck in the middle. They've tried raising prices on some of their classic styles, but without that corresponding like boost in perceived value, you know,
Right.
like a hot collaboration, groundbreaking technology, something to kind of justify the higher price tag.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just comes off as, well, kind of opportunistic.
So they need to give people a reason to believe that those higher prices are like worth it. It's that like, I gotta have it, like, even if it means I'm eating ramen for a month.
Exactly. And that kind of circles back to, you know, that innovation gap that we were talking about. To command those premium prices, Adidas needs to offer something like truly unique, something that kind of pushes boundaries. They can't just ride the retro wave. They need to create their own tide, you know.
Okay, so they need to like step up their innovation game, but at the same time, they're also trying to kind of appeal to a wider market with those more affordable options, right?
Yeah.
Didn't we hear that they were introducing products below that, like €100 mark?
Yes.
Right.
And while that can be a smart move, you know, to kind of broaden their customer base, it's a tightrope walk.
Yep.
Because if they're not careful, it could dilute that premium image that they're trying to cultivate.
It's a tough balancing act. They need to be the brand for the like fashion-forward sneakerhead and the everyday consumer. But even if they like crack the code on pricing, there are all those like global challenges that we talked about. Can their like new localized strategy really like make a dent in a market like North America where Nike is just like king?
You know, I think she was actually quite skeptical about that.
Yeah.
She doesn't really see Adidas bridging that gap anytime soon, even with a more like tailored approach.
Why is that? What makes the North American market so tough for Adidas to like crack?
I mean, Nike is just like so deeply embedded in American culture,
Yeah.
especially like when it comes to basketball.
Yeah.
They've built a fortress of like brand loyalty, and I think they have this really innate understanding of the American consumer.
Mhm.
Adidas, despite their efforts, I think they're still often seen as the quote-unquote European brand.
Yeah.
You know, that,
So cracking the North American market might take more than just like localized products. It's about changing those like perceptions. It's about like weaving themselves into the fabric of like American culture.
exactly. And if we thought North America was tough, you know, China presents a whole other level of complexity.
That's right. You mentioned that the Chinese market is incredibly competitive with local brands, like really gaining ground.
Oh, it's so dynamic. I mean, consumers there are very, very savvy. Brand loyalty is constantly being challenged. You know, it takes more than just adapting your products. You need a deep, deep understanding of the like cultural nuances, the consumer behaviors in China to really resonate.
So Adidas is facing an uphill battle on like multiple fronts.
Yeah.
Their current success is tied to this like fading trend. They're having trouble like cracking into these key markets, and their pricing strategy seems a little, I don't know, muddled maybe. So where does that leave them?
Well, while North America and China, you know, remain like challenging, there are bright spots. I mean, you know, Adidas's success in Latin America.
Right.
It shows that like a targeted, localized strategy can yield some like really impressive results.
It's a good reminder that the global market is like this tapestry of different like tastes and trends. What works in one region might not work in another.
Exactly. It really highlights the need for like flexibility and adaptability, which brings us back to, you know, Bjorn Gulden, Adidas's new CEO.
Right.
He's all about agility and responsiveness. He sees that Adidas needs to evolve, but the question is, can he make those changes stick?
Right, because we were just talking about Adidas's like cautious culture, trying to inject this just do it mentality into that. That could be like easier said than done.
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's classic clash of cultures, right?
Yeah.
And from what I understand, Gulden is kind of tackling this on like two fronts. First, he's really focused on rebuilding those relationships with wholesale partners.
Oh, that's interesting, because for a while there, it seemed like Adidas, like a lot of brands, was really laser focused on that like direct-to-consumer model, right? Selling directly through their own website, their own stores.
Exactly. And, you know, while that can be really effective, I think ultimately it might have actually hurt them in the long run.
Really? Why is that? You'd think like having more control over your sales channels would be a good thing.
Yeah, it seems kind of counterintuitive, but think about it. Consumers shop everywhere.
Right.
They're online, they're in department stores, they're in those big sporting goods chains. If Adidas is only focusing on their own channels, they're missing out on a huge chunk of potential customers.
So by like shifting back towards wholesale, they're essentially like casting a wider net, making sure that like those three stripes are like seen everywhere.
Precisely. And, you know, Gulden, very strategically, I think, made it a point to personally reassure those wholesale partners that they were valued, that he was committed to, like, collaboration.
Smart. It's about like rebuilding trust, showing those partners that they're not just a transaction. They're like, you know, part of the Adidas family. But what about like those like internal cultural shifts? That's a much tougher nut to crack, right?
It is, yeah. You can't just, like, flip a switch and expect a company to change overnight, especially, you know, one with a history as long and as, like, kind of storied as Adidas. But she did point out some, like, key initiatives that he's implemented. One is, like, decentralizing decision-making, giving more power to those regional teams.
So it ties back to that like localized approach.
Exactly.
Less top-down,
Yeah.
more like flexibility to kind of like respond to what's happening on the ground in those different markets.
Exactly. The goal is to make Adidas more nimble, faster on its feet. And it makes sense, right? If every decision has to go through, like, headquarters in Germany, you inevitably lose momentum.
Yeah, it's like trying to like steer a giant ship with a tiny little rudder. You need to be able to like adapt to those changing currents really quickly.
And, you know, beyond just, like, structure, it's about changing, like, the culture itself.
Right.
And, you know, she said that he's really trying to foster, like, a more open, collaborative environment where taking risks is encouraged. It's about kind of shifting the mindset from, like, avoid failure at all costs to, you know, let's learn from our mistakes and move forward.
It's about celebrating the like bold swings, even if they're not home runs.
Totally.
Because sometimes, you know, even a strikeout, you can learn something valuable.
It's about fostering a culture of experimentation and, like, learning.
So Adidas is at a crossroads, right? They need to figure out how to ride out this like retro wave while simultaneously creating the next like big thing.
Right.
They need to crack the code of those really, really challenging markets while kind of navigating this global landscape that's like constantly in flux.
Yeah, it's a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
And, you know, only time will tell if they can pull it off. Will they regain their footing in those key markets? Will they reignite that, like, innovative spark? Will this new CEO, with his outsider perspective, be able to kind of, like, usher in a new era for Adidas?
It's a high-stakes game they're playing, and we'll all be watching to see how it unfolds. So the next time you see those three stripes, whether it's on a billboard or someone's sneakers or a tracksuit like flashing by, remember what we talked about today. Remember those challenges, the opportunities, that like delicate balancing act that Adidas is trying to manage.
It's such a fascinating case study, I think, in, like, how brands evolve and adapt and, like, ultimately define themselves in a world that's, like, constantly changing.
It's been a deep dive indeed. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep your minds curious and your sneakers laced up tight.
See you on the next Deep Dive.